You're listening to Short History Shorts audio, where history speaks louder than images. The Athenian Assembly, or Ecclesia, was the beating heart of Athenian democracy, a radical experiment in self-government that placed decision-making power directly in the hands of its citizens, not in a king, council of elites, or hereditary nobles. From the 5th to 4th centuries BC, it was the most powerful political institution in Athens, responsible for making laws, deciding on war and peace, electing officials, and overseeing the conduct of public affairs. To understand the assembly is to understand the essence of Athenian democracy. Its origins can be traced back to the reforms of Solon in the early 6th century BC, when the rigid aristocratic control of the city began to loosen. Solon's laws opened political participation to a broader range of citizens, categorized into 4 property classes, each with varying degrees of influence. However, the assembly at this stage remained a limited body, more a gathering for public announcement than a true forum for decision-making. It was Cleisthenes, at the turn of the 5th century BC, who transformed the ecclesia into a genuine legislative body. His reforms, introduced around 508 BC after the expulsion of the tyrant Hippias, reorganized the citizen body into 10 new tribes based not on family lineage but on residence, thus breaking up the power of old aristocratic factions. Each tribe sent representatives to the new Council of 500, the Boule, which prepared matters for debate in the assembly. Under Cleisthenes' system, the ecclesia became the sovereign decision-making authority, open to all male citizens over the age of 18 who had completed their military training. In practice, this meant that perhaps 30,000 to 40,000 citizens were eligible to attend, though the number present on any given day varied. Meetings were held on the Nix, a hill within sight of the Acropolis, where citizens would gather in a semicircular space to debate and vote on issues. The location itself was symbolic. It was public, open air, and accessible to ordinary Athenians, a physical manifestation of transparency in governance. By the mid-5th century BC, under the leadership of figures like Pericles, the assembly met roughly 40 times per year, about once every 9 or 10 days, reflecting the intensity of political life in a direct democracy. There were 4 scheduled meetings per prytany, the 35 to 36-day term, in which one of the 10 tribes held the presidency of the council. The first meeting dealt with religious matters, the second with foreign policy, the third with legislative issues, and the fourth served as a catch-all for other urgent business. Extraordinary meetings could be called in times of crisis, such as during military emergencies or political unrest. Attendance was encouraged through payment introduced in the 5th century BC, known as mistos ecclesiastikos, which helped poorer citizens afford to take time off work to participate. The assembly's agenda was set by the Boule, but within the assembly itself, any citizen had the right to speak, a practice known as isagoria, or equal speech. This principle was revolutionary. In theory, a poor farmer could stand alongside a wealthy general and address the entire citizen body. Speakers would mount the bema, a stone platform, and present their arguments, often employing rhetoric, appeals to tradition, or practical concerns to persuade their fellow citizens. The presiding officer, chosen by lot for a single day's term, managed the order of speakers and oversaw voting. Decisions were made by a simple majority, with citizens raising their hands or in some cases using secret ballots. The assembly's powers were vast. It decided on war and peace, approved treaties, authorized military expeditions, passed laws, granted citizenship, ostracized dangerous individuals, and scrutinized the conduct of magistrates. Its control over foreign policy was especially significant in the age of the Athenian Empire, when it directed tribute collection from allied states, approved military campaigns such as the Sicilian expedition, and responded to crises like revolts in subject cities. This breadth of authority made the assembly both a source of civic pride and a potential instrument of rash decision-making, as critics such as Thucydides and later philosophers like Plato and Aristotle observed. The openness of debate allowed skilled orators like Pericles, Cleon, and Alcibiades to sway public opinion dramatically, sometimes leading to bold and successful policies, other times to disastrous miscalculations. The infamous decision to execute the entire male population of Mytilene during the Peloponnesian War, later rescinded after a second meeting, illustrates the volatility of mass decision-making in such a system. Despite its flaws, the assembly embodied the democratic ideal that political power should reside in the hands of the people. It was also a training ground for civic participation. Citizens not only voted, but also learned to listen critically, evaluate arguments, and engage in the political life of the polis. The requirement that proposals be lawful and beneficial was enforced by the graph paranomon, a legal challenge against unconstitutional measures which could be brought against the proposer of a decree. Over time, procedural refinements were introduced to prevent hasty legislation, especially in the 4th century BC after the restoration of democracy following the oligarchic coups of 411 and 404 BC. The physical experience of attending the assembly was itself a statement of citizenship. The walk to the Pnyx, the sight of the Acropolis, the press of bodies in the crowd, and the sound of speeches carried on the wind all reinforced the notion that every citizen had a stake in the destiny of Athens. The payment for attendance and the expectation of participation also reflected the belief that democracy was not merely a political system, but a way of life. The decline of the assembly came gradually, accelerated by the rise of Macedonian power in the 4th century BC. After Athens' defeat at Chaeronea in 338 BC, the city retained its democratic institutions in name, but real autonomy was curtailed. Under Roman rule, the assembly became largely ceremonial, its decisions subject to the approval of imperial authorities. Yet its legacy endured, influencing later republican and democratic systems in ways both direct and indirect. The idea that ordinary citizens could deliberate and decide on the affairs of state would echo through history, from the Roman Republic's popular assemblies to the town meetings of colonial America. Today, the Athenian Assembly stands as one of the earliest and most fully developed examples of direct democracy, a reminder of both the potential and the perils of entrusting power to the people. It demonstrated that governance could be participatory, dynamic, and responsive, but also that it required vigilance, education, and a shared sense of civic responsibility to function effectively. The Pnyx still stands in Athens, a silent witness to the thousands of debates, decisions, and dramas that once played out under the Attic sun. In the shadow of the Acropolis, the stones bear the imprint of a political experiment that, for all its flaws and eventual decline, remains one of the most influential in human history. The Ecclesia was not just an institution, it was the living embodiment of the Athenian belief that the city belonged to its citizens, and that their voices, raised together, could chart its